The great Taoist sage Zhuangzi has one of the most unique ways of viewing the world, which runs counter to conventional thinking. Let's find out how his view of life can enlighten us in the modern world. One of the most profound books in the world, and definitely one of the most different and unique books in the world, is the Zhuangzi text. Now, this is one of the texts that everyone must read on the spiritual path because it helps you understand even other philosophies a lot better, no matter whether it's Advaita Vedanta, Vajrayana Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, and even Taoism itself. Now, I often tell people that the Zhuangzi is more important than the Tao Te Ching in understanding Taoist thought. Now, that doesn't mean the Tao Te Ching is any lesser than the Zhuangzi, but Zhuangzi himself embodies Taoist thinking and the teachings of Lao Tzu and takes it even a step further in how to deal with the world around us. And that is what I'll speak to you about today, because Zhuangzi has a very unique view on life, and his way of thinking runs counter to all type of ordinary logic and conventional thinking and standards. But this is what is important in understanding the depth of not only Taoist thought, but Eastern philosophical and spiritual thought. So today I'm going to read to you a piece of the introduction of the Zhuangzi text, which is translated by Burton Watson. So this is Burton Watson speaking about Zhuangzi and the depth of his understanding of the world and how it goes against all sorts of conventional standards and judgments. So let me read this passage to you. In Zhuangzi's view, the man who has freed himself from conventional standards of judgment can no longer be made to suffer, for he refuses to recognize poverty as any less desirable than affluence, to recognize death as any less desirable than life. He does not in any literal sense withdraw and hide from the world. To do so would show that he still passed judgment upon the world. He remains within society, but refrains from acting out of the motives that lead ordinary men to struggle for wealth, fame, success, or safety. He maintains a state that Zhuangzi refers to as wu wei, or inaction, meaning by this term not a forced quietude, but a course of action that is not founded upon any purposeful motives of gaining or striving. In such a state, all human actions become as spontaneous and mindless as those of the natural world. Man becomes one with nature, or heaven as Zhuangzi calls it, and merges himself with Tao, or the Way, the underlying unity that embraces man, nature, and all that is in the universe. So first of all, in this passage, Zhuangzi's view is that the man who has freed himself from conventional standards and judgments can no longer be made to suffer. So once we have cleansed our mind of all of these projections of right and wrong, good and bad, we can be free in the world and we won't suffer according to the conditioning that we have all endured through this life. Zhuangzi actually mentions in the Zhuangzi text this Maoist idea of Qing, which means species-specific essence. Now, Zhuangzi says that this species-specific essence is actually a flaw because a human species-specific essence cuts the world up into this and that. That's what makes us unique as a human. We overanalyze reality and we dissect between this and that according to the conditioning we've all endured. So then we create this framework, this illusion, what in Sanskrit would be called Maya, the illusion of measurement, where we measure the world up according to our likes and dislikes and our belief systems. But that's not the actual reality. And so Zhuangzi is saying here, when we've freed ourselves from all of these conventional ways of thinking, these belief systems, even our own likes and dislikes, then we cannot be made to suffer. We are like a leaf floating freely down a river, but we're not fighting the river anymore. And this is what de is, right? De in Chinese means this organic virtue that we have when we stop fighting the current of the Tao. We just move with the river as one, and so the river's power becomes our power. This is what is, right? This is the Tao moving through us. And so from this perspective, Zhuangzi doesn't see poverty as anything less desirable than affluence, and same with death and life, right? Because he is free from suffering. Now, when you are free from those ideas of, say, poverty and affluence, you see the world for what it is. Oftentimes, we judge the world according to the life that we live. So we might go to a third world country, for example, and we judge the way that they live according to the way that we live, right? I've spent a lot of time with foreigners, for example, in India, who will say that they feel privileged to be where they're from, or they're grateful to be where they're from because of how people live in certain parts of India. And I feel like the people don't need your pity. And the irony is, those same people will look at the family life in these so-called poor places, and the family life is very tight, and that's something that they don't have in the West, for example. And so from Zhuangzi's perspective, he doesn't see it from his own perspective. He sees it for just what it is. It's like the story of the economic hitman, John Perkins, where John Perkins, when he went to Indonesia, he told the shaman in the community there in the jungle that he's going to bring the modern world to him. He's going to make them prosperous and rich. And then the shaman looks around and he's got all the food he needs to eat. Sure, he lives in a bamboo hut and whatnot. He doesn't have a concrete block like we do in developed countries. But he said to John, he said, what do we actually lack here? And this is what made John Perkins reflect, because he thought, well, what do they lack? They have everything they need. And we're coming in here with the World Bank and the IMF and all of these foreign institutions and trying to bring society and civilization, in air quotes, to this community when they already have everything that they need. And so we have to be very careful with how we judge the world, because as Zhuangzi says here, the freed person overcomes all of conventional standards and judgments. So we don't walk around the world and look at the world, look at all these poor people based on our own life, right? And so Zhuangzi doesn't see it that way. And same with death and life. Like, he understands that death will come. And his perspective of death is, why do we have such a negative perspective of death? Because death is just a constant process of life. But we yearn to keep and hold on to life and try to avoid death. But we need to, in some sense, accept that we are going to die one day. And in doing so, we approach it not with fear, but with acceptance and actually an understanding that it's as important as life. Now, that might not mean anything to us now while we're living, but according to Zhuangzi, this is just the process and the transformations of life. We are attached to one aspect of transformation of life and we avoid the other. And so the next part, Zhuangzi speaks about that the freed man doesn't try to escape the world. They accept the world for what it is, but they don't try to avoid it. They live in the world, but they're not of it. Because if they try to escape the world, as Burton Watson mentions here about Zhuangzi, is that we've kind of passed judgment on the world. But the key here in the Zhuangzi teachings is that it's not that you need to leave the world. You can live in the world, but the important thing is that you don't live out the motives of what society and culture are always trying to tell us is the way of life. When oftentimes when you look around at the world and people are living out what the culture and society tells them that is important for them to do, people suffer. And their motives of chasing wealth, success, and fame, etc., continually make people live in this very desperate and depressive state, where Zhuangzi has freed himself from all of that. He doesn't operate from those motives. He lives out his life according to how the Tao moves through him and however life presents itself. And so he lives like, as I said, like that leaf flowing down the river. And he lives like that because of Wu Wei, the path of effortless living, of non-interference, of non-doing. So this is one of the main teachings in the Zhuangzi text, and obviously in the Tao Te Ching, is Wu Wei. It's the essential teaching of Taoism in some sense, is that path where we don't interfere with life, but we just move with life as a piece of life, and we don't fight the Tao, we move with it, and we accept life for what it is. Our life, actually, we accept. It doesn't mean that you don't act immediately and appropriately to each and every situation, which Zhuangzi talks about as well. But when we look at how our life is, we just move with it. So we act in a natural way, just like nature, because we are nature. As Burton and Watson said, that Zhuangzi moves spontaneously and in some sense mindlessly and just moves through life because he has got rid of all of these likes and dislikes according to his conditioning and this belief system, right? So once you get rid of this socially accepted mentality of gain and striving, as Burton Watson says about Zhuangzi, then you become spontaneous just like Zhuangzi, and you move as one with the river of the Tao. And so you become essentially one with the Tao. This is the importance of Wu Wei, and this is the paradox of unity. And so a lot of people talk about oneness and unity and so forth and so on, and they want to set up something to try and achieve that. But you have to completely let go and allow the Tao's power to become your power. And then you will understand truthfully the nature of the Tao, not through striving or gain, but by letting go and allowing the Tao to do you rather than you do it. Shanti, shanti, shanti.